coming up on Lawmakers. The House and Senate passed similar measures designed to give the prosecution and defense equal jury strikes. A bill that would require 9 cold medications containing pseudoephedrine to be placed behind the counter passed the House. And the House passes a bill that would protect prayer at private school before athletic events. Those stories and more are next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers for Friday, March 11th. Here are your anchors, Nwandi Lawson and Gerald Bryant.
And good evening, everyone. As you can see there, the Georgia General Assembly is still in session at this hour. You can see both the House and the Senate are live. Also coming up on our program tonight, the Governor's Faith and Family Services Amendment is expected to be debated in the Senate before the night is over.
And the Senate Appropriations Committee passes out its version of the FY06 budget, but first, a tragic shooting near the Capitol today. The 2-block area surrounding the state capitol was a blur of police activity this morning after a fatal shooting. A suspect identified as Brian Nichols allegedly shot and killed 3 people in a Fulton County courtroom less than a mile from the Capitol. Nichols was apparently in court as a suspect in a rape trial when he reportedly took a gun from a sheriff's deputy and then he shot and wounded that deputy. Nichols allegedly then shot and killed Judge Rowland Barnes and his court reporter. The suspect then fled the Fulton County Courthouse and allegedly shot and killed another sheriff's deputy during his escape. Nichols then reportedly carjacked a 1997 green Honda Accord and evaded law enforcement. Suspect Brian Nichols is still at large. Governor Sonny Perdue is offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to Nichols' apprehension.
Well, the House today passed the Criminal Justice Act of 2005. This portion of Governor Sonny Perdue's legislative agenda changes procedures in criminal trials to, among other things, allow a defendant to appeal to a state court and to require that the defendant personally appeal to a judge when asking that the judge recuse himself from a case. But the most controversial provision allows defense and prosecuting attorneys the same chance to recuse jurors in the selection process. Representative Rich Golick explains equal strikes.
It's their ability to strike someone from a jury and then to have 12 people ultimately, depending on the type of case, to go ahead and try the case. If it's a felony case, 12 people. This type of issue has been brought to the House before for consideration and failing to get a vote. What the equal strikes provisions will do essentially is to give the prosecution and the defense an equal number of strikes in misdemeanor cases, in felony cases, and in death penalty cases.
Presenting the minority report, Representative Tom Bordeaux referred to the judge murdered in the Fulton County Courthouse this morning in expressing the Democrats' opposition to the bill.
Today is an especially difficult day to be talking about this bill from my standpoint. This morning, a judge, a man who's supposed to preside over trials, preside over the administration of justice in his courtroom, was murdered. It's on days like this that you want to say, convict them all. My mother used to say they ought to be locked up and the key thrown away. They ought to be put beneath the jail. And I believe that. But I believe victims' rights means convicting the right person. There is no higher insult to a victim than to convict the wrong person of a crime. Number one, it does an injustice to the wrong person. Number two, it allows the right person, the one who actually committed the crime, to go free.
The House passed House Bill 170, 152 to 4, and it moves to the Senate. Meanwhile, a similar equal strikes jury measure, Senate Bill 2, passed the Senate this afternoon. That vote was 37 to 10.
Meanwhile, Governor Sonny Perdue's Faith and Family Service Amendment is slated for discussion today, but things have been running slowly in the Senate. SR 49 will allow religious groups providing public services to receive state funding. The resolution is up for reconsideration after the legislation failed to receive the 2/3 votes necessary to pass the first time it was on the floor. Lawmakers Chris Knight joins us live from the Capitol with more. Chris.
Well, Gerald, Senate Resolution 49 was debated on the Senate floor earlier this session, but was 4 votes shy of the 38 votes needed to pass. Some legislators, including Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor, say that the amendment would open the door for school vouchers, but others disagree.
I'm for a faith initiative, but it needs to be a good faith initiative. I believe that that's what the people of Georgia want. Faith based in good faith, but no vouchers.
No one on the Democratic side is against faith-based. In fact, we've had faith-based under Democratic leadership for over 30 years in this state. So that's not the issue. The issue simply comes down to our concern that we're going to create a situation which will allow private school vouchers in this state, something that the voters themselves have not made a decision on. And I don't see that we should do that through a backdoor mechanism. So the point simply is this: if it's not about vouchers, all we're asking is that language be put in to the bill or to the resolution, and at that point you would have probably 16 Democratic senators come over to vote for it.
I am not in support of that, because all we're trying to do is model it after the federal Constitution. And if you start carving out exceptions, where do you stop? And the consensus of at least the majority of us is that we don't need to go there. We need to just simply go with what the federal Constitution says. This is not a vouchers bill. It's not a vouchers enabling bill. This bill is about providing and removing the Blaine amendments from our Constitution.
And Senate Resolution 49 is expected to be debated on the Senate floor this evening. It would need 38 votes to pass. Reporting live, I'm Chris Knight for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Chris. Well, one reason that resolution hasn't come up is the Senate passed only one bill before the lunch break today. That's because they spent most of the morning debating the engrossment of two bills. Engrossment means the bills can't be changed. Democrats expressed outrage over the Republicans' motions to engross.
Only on the most important bills, and it's being used purely for partisan purposes.
Engrossment should be something that is rarely used. To cut off debate and to cut off ideas is wrong.
Don't be like a lemming and jump off the cliff just because you got your marching orders.
It's up to you. Don't become sheep.
Now, one of the bills successfully engrossed by Republicans was Senate Bill 174. It would allow insurers not to provide some state-mandated health benefits. Backers of the bill said it would allow some more affordable health care plans that would benefit small businesses and people who can't afford more costly policies. Opponents said it opened the door to deny benefits to many, especially women. Here's part of today's debate, beginning with Senator Cecil Staton, sponsor of SB 174.
Simply put, Senate Bill 174 is about removing some of those mandates so that we can offer to Georgians health insurance options that are more affordable and flexible. This is not a political issue. This is an issue about insuring more Georgians.
Down here it says this chapter shall be known and cited as Georgia Consumer Choice of Benefits. What a crock. You know, man, I'm not going to talk about Affleck, walks like a duck, and talk to me. Listen, if it walks like a pig and looks like a pig and smells like one, it's a pig.
You know, I sit here and I've heard a lot of comments about pigs. Well, I'm going to tell you something. You can call it a pig, but that doesn't make it a pig. This bill is not against women. Those that want to scare you and use scare tactics and trying to go to the extreme are doing that to try to protect a special interest. I'm going to tell you something. I'll tell you why I support this bill. Because there are women out there today who have no insurance, which means they don't have any coverage to get their pap smears, to get their mammograms.
Are you willing to put at risk the lives of the women close to you when studies have shown that there is only that tiny cost increase associated with mandatory services? Are you willing to step backwards?
After the debate, Senate Bill 174 passed 31 to 21 and now heads to the House.
The other bill engrossed was Senate Bill 258, a measure designed to benefit Georgia National Guard members and reservists who have been on active duty. Senator John Douglas listed some of the provisions of the measure.
Number one is jury duty. Any service member or spouse who requests to be excused from jury duty will be given such an exemption. Pharmacy license, and we had to take pharmacy license out and indicate it in here separately because it's in a different code section. Any person licensed to practice pharmacy and whose license expired while on active duty can practice for up to 6 months after discharge or relocation within Georgia with no penalty incurred. Hunting and fishing licenses. Each returning service member will be entitled to a 1-year honorary hunting and fishing license. Driver's licenses. Expiration date on their driver's licenses will automatically be extended for a period of 6 months from the time of return to Georgia or discharge from active service.
Senator Tim Golden had objected to the engrossment of the bill. He wanted to amend this measure to provide for a voter checkoff on state income taxes. That would allow voters to donate part of any tax refund to a fund for families of guardsmen and reservists.
At least put it out, let it be debated, and vote it down if you want to. Of course, I know why you're doing it. You don't want to vote against it, because you know it's a good idea. Yet you won't allow us to vote on it. It's a shame and disgrace. It's a sham. And you're pulling it on the very people who are protecting us and keeping us free and allowing us to be here to have this debate.
Senate Bill 258 passed by a vote of 55-0 and now moves to the House. And over on the House side, an attempt to restrict monies that labor unions representing state employees can use for political contribution. It failed passage today, but not without some unusual maneuvers.
This bill protects the union member from the misuse of dues they pay for legal insurance and administrative purposes and not to go to some politician's campaign. Political funds are meant for that, and that's what this establishes.
Representative Winfred Dukes introduced a floor substitute to extend the provision to all professional organizations.
If the labor unions are required for the reporting, then so should the Home Builders Association.
After lengthy floor debate, Republican leadership moved to table the bill, drawing fire from top Democrats.
It cuts off on this issue of free speech, the free speech of members who have signed up to speak on this bill.
The gentleman moved the previous question, which he has that right to do under the rules of the House, as he always has had that right. The purpose of the gentleman rise, Majority Leader.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
Stays inquiry.
Wouldn't the motion to lay it on the table, in fact, not only keep free speech open, it would end debate on the bill as of today and prevent any more speech on the bill? Isn't that correct?
Given the fact that we are trying to get all the bills crossed over today, the gentleman is correct.
The motion to table failed, as did the original bill. And finally, even the floor substitute had been voted down, presenting an unusual situation.
Yeas are 67, the nays are 102. The motion has failed. Now, Mr. Clerk, certainly it's the first time this has happened in my tenure here. I believe that the posture we're in now is that suspension of debate on the bill has taken place, and any further debate on the bill at this time would be out of order. Is that correct? That is correct. So debate is suspended on action at this time.
And meanwhile, the House also voted today to put certain cold medicines that contain pseudoephedrine behind the counter because that's a key ingredient in manufacturing the drug methamphetamine. However, House Bill 216 does not require a signature from the purchaser, a measure that was debated over 20 hours in committee. David Delsky joins us live from the Capitol with more on House Bill 216. David.
Well, in Wandy, several versions of meth bills were offered, but it was freshman Representative Jay Neal's version that ended up passing in committee. He claims that House Bill 216 would be a helpful tool for law enforcement to track where supply and demand for the product are unnecessarily high.
The young lady told me last fall, she says it's just like being wrapped in the tentacles of an octopus. You can't break free.
It addresses the supply by restricting single ingredient pseudoephedrine to the sale in blister packages and behind the counter, and limits the amount that you can purchase in a single transaction. It also requires any wholesaler who distributes in Georgia to be licensed by the Board of Pharmacy, thus giving law enforcement much desired tools for enforcing the diversion of pseudoephedrine. Wholesalers and retailers alike would be required to maintain documentation that would verify the acquisition and sales of pseudoephedrine, and this documentation would be available to law enforcement. This bill provides incentives to retailers to incorporate Georgia Meth Watch program. This program educates retail employees and the general public and meth users concerning the manufacture and use of methamphetamine.
Anything we can do to prevent the explosions where children are involved or anyone's involved on the innocent side that we can do to help that problem, then we're taking the right steps.
Now, part of the retail education program in the bill would suggest small meth watch signs about the size of a Post-it note on all products that are used in the manufacturing of meth. House Bill 216 now goes to the Senate. Reporting live, I'm David Zelsky for Lawmakers.
Thanks so much, David.
Well, today may be considered crossover day for the House and Senate to pass their bills, but Speaker Glenn Richardson says that will not affect the legislation which will be taken up tomorrow during Family Day. Speaker Richardson said today that the House fully intends to pass those bills the Senate will take up tomorrow that repeal obsolete laws.
I don't think there's any doubt that we all agree that we're going to repeal, do those repeals tomorrow, and we're going to take up theirs, they're going to take up ours. And that Rule 30 is not a rule. I just call it Rule 30, but it's not a rule. It's an agreement. It's a gentleman's agreement between the President Pro Tem of the Senate and myself that we will, in our effort to try to get our job done quickly and efficiently, consider bills passed through the first 30 days. And we're going to try to do that. We're going to try to stick to that. But we are able to discuss things if we have to, and so I'm not going to say that there couldn't be one or two bills that might be considered if they get adopted next week.
Now, tomorrow, the House and Senate will take up bills that are considered obsolete, including Jim Crow legislation that are still on the books in Georgia.
Well, with fewer than 10 days remaining in this year's session, let's get an update on important legislation. As of day 30, the House and Senate have agreed on a supplemental budget, funding to complete this fiscal year. House Bill 84 awaits the governor's signature. The House adopted the big budget, money for FY 2006, last week. That measure has yet to make it to the Senate floor. In the area of economic development, a bill which would pave the way for the incorporation of Sandy Springs has passed the House. House Bill 37 awaits a vote in the Senate. A bill allowing the state to conduct in secret transactions to attract business passed the House last month and remains in Senate rules. Senate Bill 86, limiting the use of eminent domain, passed the Senate yesterday. It awaits consideration by the House. The Wireless Privacy Act, giving consumers the option of withholding cell phone numbers from telemarketers, passed the Senate last week. It's currently in House committee. An effort to protect email users from junk mail has passed the Senate. The House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee is currently considering the Slam Spam Email Act. The Georgia Smoke-Free Air Act, a statewide ban on public smoking, was agreed to by the Senate. It's being considered by House committee. Senate Bill 92, allowing employers to hire young workers at reduced wage for a limited period, passed the Senate. It remains in the House Industrial Relations Committee. The governor's plan to create a statewide tourism board has cleared both House and Senate and awaits the signature of Governor Sonny Perdue. In education, proposals to open a virtual high school and create a master teacher certification program have been adopted by the General Assembly and now await the governor's signature. Senate Bill 35, giving local districts additional time to determine class sizes and allocate other resources, has passed the Senate. It's currently in House rules. Moving to environmental legislation, the governor's land conservation plan, expanding the green space program statewide, passed both legislative bodies. Governor Sonny Perdue has yet to sign the measure. Meanwhile, the governor's ethics plan underwent several revisions as it made its way through the House. It is now in the Senate. The House has adopted one plan to redraw the state's congressional districts. House Bill 499 is currently in the Senate. And the Senate has prepared an alternative reapportionment plan. Senate Bill 45 is currently in the Senate Reapportionment and Redistricting Committee. Turning to social issues, the House yesterday voted to revise the guidelines for collecting child support to base payment on the income of both parents. House Bill 221 is now in the Senate. House Bill 197, which places a waiting period on abortions, has passed both the House and Senate. It awaits the governor's signature. The legislature agreed to cap non-economic damages in civil cases. Senate Bill 3, tort reform legislation, was signed by the governor last month. On the highways and byways, the House voted to authorize the Department of Transportation to convert emergency lanes into flex auto lanes to alleviate traffic congestion. House Bill 273 is currently in the Senate Rules Committee. And Senate Bill 4, exempting federal interstate projects from balancing congressional districts, cleared the Senate last month. It remains in House Transportation. And that's where some major bills stand on Legislative Day 30.
The House passed a bill today that will allow private schools to hold public prayer at athletic contests administered by the Georgia High School Association. GHSA-hosted games are typically playoff games for private schools. Lawmakers' Jesse Freeman joins us live with more on that story. Jesse.
Well, Gerald, possibly the most confusing part about this bill is that only playoff games are hosted by the GHSA, and so those are the games that would be affected by this bill. This bill would force the GHSA to allow prayer at those games if the game is played at a private school campus. Some private school students were at the Capitol today to support the bill.
Would the state legislature really deny these kids a chance to ask the Lord to protect them in a football game?
These students and administrators say they want the right to hold prayer at their athletic playoff game. Speaker Pro Tem Mark Burkhalter wants to help them.
What's happened is the High School Association in their own mind has decided that they're an agent of the state. There are no references to the Georgia High School Association, the Georgia Code, and therefore they're not the agent of the state. Therefore, this bill is I think, past legal muster.
Now, the reason the GHSA does not allow prayer at these sporting events is a precedent from a case in Tennessee, Brentwood versus Tennessee. Speaker Pro Tem Burkhalter says this is a much different situation because the GHSA operates without direct money from the state.
It dealt with the Tennessee High School Association, which was actually sanctioned by the Tennessee Department of Education. Very different here than Georgia. The Department of Education, I've got a letter from the superintendent dated yesterday saying that absolutely do not sanction any of the activities that the High School Association has here in Georgia. Therefore, it is not an agent.
Now, I talked with a spokesperson for the GHSA today, and he said they believed they were an agent of the state and wanted to operate accordingly. He also said they have no official position on this legislation. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Jesse. In other news, the Senate Reapportionment Committee today passed a congressional district map sent to them by the House. Both the House and Senate have created maps redrawing Georgia's congressional district lines. Committee Chairman Senator Chip Rogers said all Georgia's congressional delegation had been asked for input in drawing the new districts. Democrats on the committee said they had no input and questioned the need for any changes in district lines. Chairman Rogers told me the new districts are a significant improvement over the existing ones.
Well, there's no question the map that's passed out today as far as Superior and the number of counties that it splits, taking that number from 34 down to 18, the number of precincts it splits, taking it from 88 down to, I think, just a couple of dozen. And clearly, when one looks at the map, you can see that it's a superior map in just the way it appeals to the eye. Instead of having splotches of districts placed all around the metro Atlanta area, we have bold, compact, non-bizarre shaped districts. So I think that what we set out to do in the beginning is what we've achieved, and that is unify large sections of Georgia back into their proper congressional districts.
It's been nothing but a political process. There's a little bit of hypocrisy in play here. If it ought to be non-political, let's make it non-political. Let's not. We shouldn't even be taking this up. We spent too much of the people's time, energy, and resources over the last several years on this issue. It's time to get down to policy. Are we going to deal with issues like education, health care, and economic development for all Georgians, as opposed to playing inside baseball games with these kind of political issues?
Senator Rogers said the vote on the new map should come early next week.
Meanwhile, passage of the new congressional map in the House yesterday drew fire from black lawmakers who say the map dilutes African-American voting strength.
When you look at the 8th Congressional District, yes, the numbers look good, but you need to look at the number of prisons that are represented in those districts, and that is how the African-American population has been increased. So we need to be honest with ourselves, and we need to be honest with our citizens. We need to be honest with this process. And let's look at DeKalb County. One of the redistricting principles is that we would not unnecessarily split counties. Well, we've done a pretty good job splitting DeKalb County because it appears that some of our members in North DeKalb do not care to be represented by Cynthia McKinney. And that's what this map says to me, that it was split for political considerations, and that goes against the very principle that we have established in 237.
If you look at this map, even the numbers in the old 8th Congressional District are skewed. The black VAP in this district is showing today in the current map from our chairman 30.27%, down from 37.55% as drawn by our courts. Mr. Speaker, as chairman of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, I have to oppose this attempt to move in a direction that is not needed at this time. And lastly, I'd have to ask the chairman of this reapportionment committee, how was the input of the African American community or African American legislators here in the state of Georgia represented in this map?
Now, House Reapportionment Chair Bobby Franklin says both parties in the General Assembly, as well as in the U.S. Congress, and members of all races had input on the design of the map. The House map was passed out of the Senate Reapportionment Committee, and it, of course, moved over to Senate rules.
The Senate Appropriations Committee today passed its version of the FY06 state budget. All budget bills originate in the House after the governor makes budget recommendations. Then the Senate constructs its version of the spending plan. I talked with Senate Appropriations Chairman Jack Hill, who told me he thought the Senate version was solid with no major disagreements with the House budget bill.
I think it's a very good budget for human needs. It focuses on children, focuses on our most vulnerable, our seniors, and we think that it has some I think the benefits of our improving economy are reflected in where we put our priorities and our spending. And I think that as members begin to examine it more closely, they'll see that we really have, we think, addressed some of the pressing needs in the state. We actually agreed on quite a few items. The restoration of cuts to hospitals, we agreed with. Some of the other restorations of cuts that would have affected different providers of Medicaid. Most of the peach care changes or restorations there we've agreed with. We've shortened the time that when a family fails to pay their premium peach care, we've shortened the time so they can get right back on by paying their premium. We think we think the differences are not that major. Some philosophy, I think we need to discuss at conference.
And the Senate is expected to vote on the 06 budget next week, and then the final budget document will be worked out in a conference committee.
Some legislators are trying to improve health care in Georgia. Representative Pam Stevenson spoke to advocates for patients' rights today at the Capitol about the Consumer Right to Participate Act. Lawmakers Angela Vondrasek has that story.
Representative Stevenson, one of the sponsors of the act, believes that more citizen involvement may reduce medical negligence and the malpractice lawsuits that follow.
The entitlement of the bill is the Consumer Right to Participate Act. That simply means that the consumer will engage with the medical profession in assisting, in aiding, and advocating in the community by being a part of the board that actually sets forth the types of disciplinary proceedings.
The goal is not to have more malpractice cases. The goal is to have good quality health care and not to have people dying needlessly.
And the American Association of Retired Persons agrees that quality control is the first step to improving health care in Georgia.
Because if the state of Georgia is really serious about reducing the number of lawsuits filed as a result of medical negligence, then we must all work to eliminate the true root of those lawsuits, and that is the medical errors themselves.
The Journal of American Medical Associations ranks Georgia's overall quality of care as 47th in the nation. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Angela Vondrasek.
Coming up tomorrow, a special edition of Lawmakers. It's Family Day at the Capitol. From 10 a.m. until noon, we'll be bringing you live coverage of the General Assembly's proceeding. That's tomorrow, Saturday, March 12th, from 10 a.m. until noon, only here on Georgia Public Broadcasting. Now I invite you to stay tuned for Georgia Business Report. That is next here on Georgia Public Broadcasting.
And that's our broadcast for this, the 30th Legislative Day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Wendy Lawson.
And they are still in at this hour. We will catch up on all their activities tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.